Hello, my name is Sue Lloyd and I'm Vice Chair of the ISSB. I'm really excited to kick off this webcast series where we're going to discuss our educational material on sustainability-related risks and opportunities and the disclosure of material information, which we'll refer to as our Materiality Guide. This guide is a really important piece of educational material and it's part of the ISSB's broader efforts to support the implementation of IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. In this video, I'll provide an overview of some of the main messages included in the Materiality Guide and what you can expect as part of this webcast series. As a reminder, all of our educational material can be found on our website under Application Support, together with a list of our other activities we're doing to support the application of IFRS S1 and IFRS S2. Now here's what you can expect from this webcast series. There'll be 5 webcasts, including this one. For this first video, we'll introduce the document by going over the content and structure of the Materiality Guide, as well as an overview of its main messages. Then we'll dive into each chapter of the Materiality Guide. That material is organised into 3 chapters and we'll have a separate webcast for each of those chapters. One webcast on the definition of material information and its application in the ISSB standards. Another webcast on sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could be reasonably expected to affect an entity's prospects and its application in ISSB standards. And finally, one on identifying and disclosing material information. I'll then close out this webcast series in video 5 with some closing remarks and final messages. As a reminder, all educational material, including the Materiality Guide and this webcast series, are not part of the ISSB standards, so they can't add to or change the requirements that are set out in those standards. Educational materials are designed to support understanding, but they can't override what's set out in the standards. So let's start with an overview of the Materiality Guide and its main messages. I suggest watching these webcasts in the order that they're shown on this slide. When you open up the Materiality Guide, one of the first things that you'll see are main messages. Here you'll find the most important messages from each chapter and a summary of what the guide says about each of them. These main messages are included on the following slides. I'll go over them briefly and then we'll get into more detail on these as part of the webcast series. In the first chapter of the guide, we explain the ISSB's definition of material information. To do this, we break apart the definition into components. This helps build an understanding of the definition, which is necessary to make materiality judgments when using the ISSB standards. On the right, you see the main messages, and without speaking to each of them, what I will say about all of them is that they're true also for the definition of material information when you use the IFRS accounting standards. So you'll see that throughout the guide, connectivity is fundamental to the concept of materiality in the ISSB standards, and that starts with using a definition of material information that's aligned with the one used by our sister board, the IASB. Chapter 2 explains what sustainability-related risks and opportunities are and how to identify them. It basically explains what things you need to provide information about when you apply the ISSB standards. We'll refer to this as the what and how chapter throughout this webcast series. And again, on the right, the main messages relate to these points. Points 4 and 5 relate to the what question, what issues to report on, and point 6 relates to the how question, how you can identify them. And the last chapter, chapter 3, explains the requirements associated with identifying and disclosing material information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities that you had identified in accordance with chapter 2. So once you've worked out what to report on, how do you identify which information you need to provide when you use the ISSB standards? And there's 2 main points that I'd like to highlight about this chapter. One is that the Materiality Guide sets out an example 4-step process that an entity could follow in identifying and disclosing material information. This 4-step process is consistent with a document published by our sister board, the IASB, that explains how to make materiality judgments when you apply IFRS accounting standards. This is an IFRS Materiality Practice Statement 2. We're able to use this information as a base because we have the same definition of material information. So the good news is that for those of you with a financial reporting background, particularly if you use the IFRS accounting standards, you should recognise what's described here. And this is a really good example of connectivity in action. The second main point is that people are often confused about whether the ISSB requires information to be provided about impacts. ISSB standards do require the disclosure of information about how an entity's activities impact people and the environment when those impacts give rise to sustainability-related risks or opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect an entity's prospects. As we'll discuss through this series, IFRS S1 explains that an entity's dependencies and impacts can give rise to sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect an entity's prospects, and information about both dependencies and impacts could be material to primary users. Ultimately, it's the disclosure of that type of information that supports the objective of the ISSB standards. Just a couple of comments about what else you'll see throughout the Materiality Guide. First of all, examples are provided through the chapters to illustrate how an entity might apply the concepts I've just spoken about. These are set out in grey boxes throughout the Materiality Guide as well as on these slides. Then, separately, as you can see on this slide, the Materiality Guide also touches on connectivity and interoperability considerations. Connectivity considerations relate to the connections between the information provided in sustainability-related financial disclosures and the related financial statements. In particular, we focus on the work and connections between the IASB and the ISSB, and these considerations are set out in red boxes in the Materiality Guide. Interoperability considerations relate to connections and interactions between the ISSB standards and European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS, or GRI standards. Considerations about interoperability are set out in blue boxes throughout the Materiality Guide. The ISSB confirmed as part of its decisions on its most recent agenda consultation that connectivity and interoperability are core activities for all of its work. So it's integral to all of the work that we do. So it's been great to be able to highlight this in the guide because it shows both that work has already been done in the development of the ISSB standards that supports connectivity and interoperability, and it also illustrates how good connectivity can support understanding of the ISSB standards. There are many connectivity and interoperability observations throughout the Materiality Guide, and we've just included a few as part of these webcast series. With that overview, I think we can wrap up this session, and I suggest that you make your way to session 2 in this webcast series, the definition of material information and its application in ISSB standards. I'll see you there.